Hey guys, Jonathan Rose, active day trader. So I just started a podcast, and yesterday I was lucky enough to have Patrick Zielbauer, Infinity Futures broker. He's been there since 2003. And Patrick and I just rapped about the market, just talked back and forth openly about kind of what he sees, what I see, a really great discussion. That podcast will be released later in this week. What's unique in my approach to the market is that I'm always going to be looking at things on a relative value basis. And by relative value, I mean S&Ps versus NASDAQ. Maybe it's going to be gold against silver. But I never want to look at anything in isolation. That just doesn't make sense to me. It just seems like in everything we do in our lives, whenever we value something, it's relative to something else. But yet when we trade, people look at things in isolation. It just doesn't make sense to me. Been trading professionally for 18 years. Throughout my career, every trade that I've been in has been a relative value trade. So let me walk you through the bond trade. Because right now the Fed's moving, the bonds are in play, and I want to show you how I was taught to look at the bond market, and maybe it'll resonate with you. So looking at the yield curve, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, 30-year, and this is going to be the ultra bond, okay? So ZT, ZF, ZN, ZB, and ultra bond. When I trade bonds, when I trade fixed income, the way that I've seen and taught people, rather than speculating whether the 10-year is going to go up or whether the 10-year is going to go down, I'd rather not do that. To me, that's speculative. I even feel like it's gambling. Rather than doing that, I want to look at the difference. I want to look at the relative difference between 10-year and 30-year. They're highly correlated instruments. I want to look at the relative difference between 30-year and the ultra. They're highly correlated instruments, right? You're dealing with a 30-year and then an ultra 30 plus. The way we look at this is it's like putting a puzzle together. And let me stop here. The fellas over at Infinity invited me. I'm going to be doing a webinar on this very topic, and it's going to be October 19th, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, October 19th. We'll put a link under the video that you guys can come, subscribe. It's free. My number one objective is for you to take away some good information. It's going to be a different perspective, probably very different from how you look at the market. So if I look at the yield curve here, let's say I want to look at just this period of this part of the yield curve. That's going to be 10s all the way out to ultra, okay? So it's ZN all the way out to ultra. Now, what do we know about these relationships? Well, part of these relationships is going to be 10s, 30s, and the other part is going to be 30s against ultra. So if we look at that, 10s, 30s plus 30s ultra equals 10s all the way out to ultra. It's part of the puzzle, right? So this is made up of this component and this component. I'll give you clean it all up over here so it doesn't seem so confusing. So just remember, anything different is going to be a little confusing at first, but then the switch will go off and be like, oh, that makes sense. So if I look at 10s, 30s, and then if I look at 30s against the ultra, 30s against 30 plus, what we definitively know is 10s to 30 plus ultra is made up of these two components. So we could analyze this guy and then see the makeup of those two relationships. That's how we look at this. It does need to be learned, but I think you'll find, like many of my students, the juice is worth the squeeze. The time you put into learning is worth the outcome that you get because, at least in my opinion, it's a high probability way of trading. Of course, there's still risks, but this just makes sense to me. So let me go through an example looking at charts. So this is just Sierra charts here. I think it comes free with the Infinity platform. And what we're looking at here is going to be 10s, 30s, also called the NOB. Silly name, but I didn't make it up. It's directly from the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And this guy is going to be 30s against ultras. And another silly name, didn't make it up, directly from the Mercantile Exchange. That's going to be the BUB. How I want you to look at this is you could analyze the 10s all the way out to those ultras and put the puzzle together by these two different pieces. And as you'll see, because of supply and demand, because these are spreads that are traded, but they're not perfectly valued like Apple or Google, they don't have 100 analysts following them and 100 market makers. At times, they're going to be off value relative to one another. So if we look at this time period right here, which is 10:07, and if we look at 10:07 right here, you'll see there's a big disconnect, right? So the NOB, this chart, got very, very inexpensive, but it's only inexpensive relative to something else. Like we talked about earlier, we don't look at anything in isolation. So the NOB at this point was very inexpensive relative to the BUB. And so if we look at the entire yield curve here, and we just look at the back end, 10s, 30s, ultra, this portion, the NOB, was going down, and this portion, the BUB, was going up. But you'll see, inevitably, they come back to some semblance of value. How to do this trade? Well, pretty straightforward. You buy the 10-year, and you sell the 30-year. And then here you sell the 30-year, and you buy the ultra. Really cool trade, something that you can really grow into and keep on learning. So again, great conversation with Patrick. Patrick, thanks again for being on the podcast. And I really appreciate Infinity Futures inviting me to present. We're going to go over this exact trade. We're going to do it October 19th, 4:30 Eastern Time. I'm going to leave the link below the YouTube video. Sign up. Come join us. Again, my number one objective, I just want to expose you to a different way of looking at the market. Let's see if it resonates with you. Any questions, guys? Email me directly. Just email support@Active Day Trader. I'm a quick reply. Thanks for watching, guys. Jonathan, Active Day Trader.